Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for your patience, and thank you for being here. This is a very exciting moment for all of us here, the first day of PQ Talks. My name is Barbara Příhodová, and I'm the curator of PQ Talks, and it's a really great pleasure, honor to welcome everyone here. I have a few words that I want to say at the beginning before we start with our wonderful panel. Yeah, I'm a little nervous, sorry. So, I want to say that PQ Talks became one of the curated sections of Prague Quadrennial in 2019, which was thanks to the vision of our artistic director, Markéta Fantová. And since then, we have created a space where practice, theory, and research meets in a full programming that we're very proud of. The core of the PQ Talks program has been shaped in conversation between me and as the curator and selected artists and researchers from more than 50 countries. So that's wonderful. And we had an open call, and the response to the call really has surpassed our expectations. And again, my appreciation to everyone that has submitted their ideas, and that's really what makes PQ Talks so great, I think. Our program is composed from several formats. We have some distinguished keynote speakers coming to talk to us. We have great roundtables, discussion panels, and we have also a great number of shorter presentations that we call flash talks. I do want to invite everyone to check the PQ website. The program is updated there, and you can find all the information. We have the abstracts, the bios of the speakers, and so please do see it and join us for our discussions. I also want to take this opportunity to briefly introduce our team. There has been a bunch of people working really hard to make this happen. We have two location managers, wonderful managers, Romana Sekáčová and Zuzka Šklíbová, who have been helping us. We have the tech guys here, Ivo, Vojta, and Jan, who's going to be helping us these upcoming days. We also have student practicants, Joe and Izzy, and a lot of volunteers. So we all are going to make sure, we're going to do our best to make sure that the event runs smoothly. And before we start, one last idea that I want to share with you, something I have carried with me since last year. During our preparatory symposium in May of 2022, Carla Rodriguez, who is one of the curators of Mexico's exhibition, spoke about the political and philosophical vision of the Zapatista Army of National Liberation, which is a popular movement organized by indigenous communities in Chiapas, Mexico, since 1994. Los Zapatistas, as they are called, strive to build a better world, or as they say, and I quote, un mundo donde quepan muchos mundos, in translation, a world where many worlds fit. And even though I'm Czech, so my cultural upbringing is obviously very far from the Maya vision in Mexico, I think this idea of a world where many worlds fit is very rich, very inspiring and powerful. And I certainly had it in mind as I was putting this program together. I hope as the following days unfold and as we gather and meet during our discussions and conversations that we can all contribute to this task of building a world of ideas together where many of our different worlds, our different experiences and different backgrounds can find their place. I know many of you, our speakers and our audiences, have come from far, so please know that this is your home now. I really look forward to our discussions, and I hope we're going to have a great time together in the following days. And with that, I would like to introduce our first panel, which is called Expanding Scenography from the South, Global Perspectives, that brings together speakers, artists and researchers from Latin America, Africa, Oceania, and Asia to present their perspectives on expanding scenography from beyond the Western perspectives. Thank you.
Okay. So, good morning, everyone. I'm Renato Bolelli Rebouças, Brazilian scenographer, artist, professor, researcher, and member of the Brazilian curatorial team for the Countries and Region exhibition. First of all, I want to thank the entire PQ team and organization, and especially Barbara, curator of PQ Talks, who enthusiastically received this project and its challenge. I also appreciate the inspiring exchanges with each participant and their powerful works. So we'll have 2 panelists online with us today. It's an honor and a duty to carry out this fundamental debate, which started from a research I have been investigating since 2005, mixing artistic practices, teaching, and countless debates in Brazil and many other countries, from the north and the south, including different universities, cultural institutions, and also international events as Prague Quadrennial. These reflections were organized in my PhD thesis, developed at the Laboratory of Performative Practice at the University of São Paulo, in partnership with the Department of Performance Studies at the New York University and the Hemispheric Institute of Performance and Politics. So, thinking about a scenography, or a theatrical and a performative practice, that expands from the South, involves complex issues that occurred since the colonial period. As you know, the apogee of scenographic production carried out in the scenic box between the Renaissance and Baroque periods, and the many impacts, confrontations, movements, and reactions developed from this process that continue until today. The invention of modernity, celebrated as a symbol of progress and one idea of future, interfered decisively in our perception and consequently in our imagination, compromising the way we create visual and spatial representation. It is from this dualistic worldview, opposing the Western civilization to the called exotic peripheral cultures, that the conceptual and practical antagonism between the culture and nature is imposed, consolidating a strategy later updated by the Industrial Revolution, which persists to this day in many places. Thinking in a decolonial way, or better, in an anti-colonial way, involves full attention to countless practices and imaginaries that we were historically consolidated as natural or normal, which crystallized violent traditions, as the creation of categories of classification, its hierarchies, and the consequent exclusion of almost everything that was not part of the understanding of this very specific and limited perspective. So, this condition manifests itself in how we understand each continent, its countries and regions, its habits in its various aspects, as social, political, and economic realities, reaching the cultural dimension until the performance art and theatre making. In this way, I ask, how do we situate ourselves as artists concerning the different contexts in which we operate? And also, how have we imagined and represented our realities and the territories around us and beyond us? So, initially, it's essential to consider that the designer is not neutral, and each choice he or she makes carries his or her beliefs, values, and also limitations and prejudices in the ways of seeing and understanding the world. This idea of the other or different, seen in a harmful way, usually associated with a threat or social fear, formed the basis of this civilizational pattern, hiding the strategies of domination, whose intention was to make people believe that some traditions were inferior. Expressions such exotic or exception have historically been used to name conceptions and modes of realization, relativizing the varied cultural perspectives around the world. Thus, I propose to think about theatrical, performative, and scenographic production, taking into account the different epistemologies that govern the perception beyond the Eurocentric model. The epistemologies of the South, a term from the human science discussed by the sociologist Boaventura de Souza Santos, is conceived as a field of epistemic challenges that seek to repair the damage and effects historically caused by capitalism in its colonial relationship with the world, and represent a possibility to embrace a set of epistemological interventions that denounce the suppression of knowledge carried out in recent centuries by the dominant norm. Thus, as a result, consequence, and unfolding of these practices, I present the concept of expanded scenography came from the South, characterizing a scenographer who puts himself or herself in situation, in relationship, in the face of the permanent process of destruction of the landscapes, as well the permanent state of ruins we inhabit. These include, for example, economic limits and the understanding of public space as a place of dispute and fear. However, it's necessary to cross the critical dimension of theological denunciation and pass through the damage the system has caused to highlight and value all the existing ancestral knowledge that remains as resistance in the face of a world that relativizes the difference. In this expansion, an ecology of knowledge is revealed, considering the complexity of the context in which it is produced and its modes of transmission. In this way, how to understand and accept theatre making from the perspective of these territories who have a sophisticated repertoire connected to the nature, to the body, and ritualistic practice, and for this reason were repressed and condemned for centuries. According to Santos, these epistemologies of the South are based on three orientations. 1, learning that the South exists. 2, learning to go South. And 3, learning from the South and with the South. So, which counter-narratives have emerged from these places and conditions? Now, we will present some aspects of this process carried out in the different continents to identify some ways of understanding. I start inviting Shabari Rao from Bangalore, South India. She's a transdisciplinary and independent artist and educator whose work is grounded in practice-based research investigating how the body and embodied knowledge can disrupt systemic power structures. So, welcome, Shabari.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Yes? Okay. So I am in Bangalore, as Renato just mentioned. So thank you, Renato, for this invitation. It's a bit weird to see my face, so big on the screen there, but I hope I get used to it. And I will soon move to my presentation, so you won't have to look at my face. But I want to start by, of course, thanking Renato for reaching out to me. It was quite a surprise. I had, to be honest, I had never heard of PQ before as an artist based in India, perhaps. I don't know. But I am delighted to be able to share some of my work with you. And unfortunately, I can't be there in person. I'd like to share a research project that I was the lead artistic researcher on, and it was carried out last year in 2022. And the project was very deeply rooted and located in a specific site. I'm going to begin to share my screen so that I'm able to share with you a little bit about that site as I speak. Do you see my screen? I'm going to take that as a yes. Okay. So this is the landscape in which this project was located, and the project was titled Open Invitation. The landscape that you see is an extremely ancient landscape. It is more than 2.5 billion years old, which is more than half the age of the Earth. And this part of India is very close to where I live in Bangalore. And it was the peninsula of, it is the peninsula of India, which was actually joined to Africa several years ago, several billions of years ago, of course, and then broke away and became attached to Asia. And these rocks have been around for billions, literally billions of years. So there is a certain kind of potency to the rocks. And as artists and scientists and, performance and filmmakers, we began to engage with the rocks in a way that we hadn't really done before, which is just to go and be there. And through the year, we created a series of artworks, of which one is a film, and which I'll be sharing some of. This is an image from the film. And we began to explore time, both geological time and human time, and presence. Again, the presence of the space, the presence of the rocks, and human presence. And this began to take shape into these artworks, of which the film is one. And as the research progressed and as the artworks began to take shape, some insights and questions arose from our process, from our research process. And these questions are what I would like to share with you today as things that I am thinking about at the moment, and I invite you to join me in that process. So my first question, as the title of my talk suggests, is about the hegemony of narrative ontology, which is, in other words, the dominance of using narrative as a way of constructing reality. Just a moment. Yeah, I hope the slide changed there as well. So my first question to all of us, and I would really invite and I look forward to your thoughts and responses to these questions that I am thinking through and working with, and that have emerged from a deep engagement with this landscape. So do we live in a time of narrative hegemony? And what I mean by that is, as with digital natives who know no other reality other than one that is digitally mediated, are we so embedded in a reality constructed by narrative that we are unable to conceive of any other? As we think about that question, I'll just leave this image for a moment. The second question that follows from the first is, does a narrative ontology promote an anthropocentric position? the properties of narrative, such as figure ground and seamless weaving together of experience, makes us the heroes of our own story. Can narrative be any other way? And my final question is, can embodied art practice provide an alternative to the hegemony of narrative ontology? When the experiential and sensorial are foregrounded in practice, can we perhaps access meaning-making that is not necessarily mediated by narrative? I'm going to stop sharing my screen because this is the end of my presentation as such. But I would like to share with you a short clip of the film that we made. It's about 6 minutes long. And I'd like you to keep in mind the idea of time and presence that we have looked at, and to also keep in mind perhaps the idea of experience and narrative, and maybe even look at whether there is an urge in you as you watch it to create a narrative. And let's see what happens. Jan, could we play the video, please? Thank you for your patience, everyone. I'm not going to say too much because I feel like that would probably defeat the point of the whole my presentation. I just want to mention that the filmmaker and editor, the person who shot and edited the video, this experimental film, his name is Manush John. He's a extremely talented filmmaker based here in Bangalore. And I would love to hear, thoughts, responses, comments, questions, observations after my other colleagues and panelists have spoken. So thank you again for your time. Thank you for your patience. Thank you, Renato, and thank you, Jan, for all the technical support. Back to you, Renato.
So thank you very much, Shabari. So if the expanded bodies constitute an essential element from which we understand ourselves as part of nature, how can we think about bodies that expand their power to create their own narratives? So now I invite Napo Machan from South Africa. She's a playwright.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Renato, but Napo had an emergency and had to leave. She has sent you an email. There was an accident at her theater, and she has messaged on the Zoom chat, and she has sent you an email if you want to check. But unfortunately, she had to leave because of an emergency. She has said that if we want to share her slides, we can go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no problem. So
yeah, I'm just seeing the message now. So yes, sadly, she's not gonna be leaving us emergency. So sorry about that, and let's move on to our speakers here in the room.
Yeah. So should we just pass her presentation or not? No.
You.
Okay. So we are sorry to say officially that we could have Napo Machan. I will just present her and this because it's part of this program, like to building these discussions. So she's a playwright, poet, stage director and producer, teacher and researcher in South African theatre history, and acclaimed performer, founding member of Philosophy Spoken Word Collective. So, just trying to have this connection, Napo would show us like she worked in so many African countries, and her presentation will be just trying to share with you some taste of this, a kind of landscape of these many diverse African perspectives and modes of creation connected with bodies and all of these issues. And so, let's just keep moving. And one of the crucial aspects of the representation of bodies and their cultures is how we perceive them. So, now I invite Raquel Rosidet, a Brazilian light designer for performance and architecture. She's a Berlin-based artist that works actively with the colonial and anti-racist dance productions. Please welcome Raquel.
Thank you. Should I stand? Makes it a little bit more formal. Okay, so first of all, thank you. I'm very, very happy to be here. Prague Quadrennial has been a constant inspiration for me since I was a student, and I'm very, very happy to be at this moment here with you. I came to present my research. It's a lighting research called Colors in Between. And it's a research based on how to make lighting for black skin or POC or BIPOC performers. And this research is started in 2018-19 on the stage. And in 2021, I managed to get grants, and I could make more like a formal research with that. I think the basis of this research and the core of it is that I am a backstage person. I'm always there and here, and I and I am always looking at performance on the stage, and I am my experience brought me to understand that I didn't know how to make lighting for black skin or for BIPOC performers, and then I was thinking, how did that happen? Because theoretically I'm 10 years in the road, and I know how to give lighting to things, and to people and to discourses, and I realized that I didn't know how to do it. And then it's when I arrived to the conclusion that technical choices are also biased by racism. So, and my technical choices and my learning and my process as a lighting designer was completely biased by racism, because I had a big flaw in my understanding of lighting. And so I was on the stage. I had 3 performers, one with a dark skin tone, I had a white woman, and I had another skin tone in the same stage, and I looked at it, and I didn't have any idea how to solve it, because brightness is different, reflection is different, the characters are different. And I struggled the whole process, and I didn't have an answer. But at some point, I arrived into several articles from film and from photography in which this discussion was happening further than in theater. This was in 2018, so it's a little bit, things changed, and Black Lives Matter happened after that, so the whole discussion got more into the media, and this discussion is more on we can see it more often. But when this started, I had references only coming from film and photography in general. So I discovered these references, and I went to see how is the film industry and how is photography solving this technical issue. How are we doing lighting for dark skin in a way that it's well shown in the camera, and that people of color in general are well represented, because the most important part of this is representation. So the first reference that I got was the film Moonlight, and I understood that there was a whole different lighting narrative in that film that included color, that included contrast, other kinds of technical mechanisms, and that I said, okay, so if that works in film, that might work in theater as well. And then I brought this this perception, and I read articles online of like how to make this lighting, and how they were fighting their technical, their racist bias in their technical conditions. And so I tried to bring it to theater. And then I brought it to the stage, and I had this play that I had different 10 black women on the stage with several different skin tones and several different costumes. And I brought to the stage this idea that color in lighting would help, and with different colors, and like one color each side that I was bringing from film. And that was for me something that I could try on immediately, because I was on the stage anyway, and it worked out. And I could see these 10 women having the same power, or being represented in the same way, or like highlighted in the same way on the stage, so that nobody with a darker skin tone would be darker or like not well represented of any kind. I had like several experiences before. I worked in a theater called Bauhaus an der Straße in Berlin, that works with post-migration theater. That means that I had very often BIPOC on the stage with dark skin tones, and what I heard was always like, put more light there. And it never works. Like, I don't know if you've been there as lighting designers, it doesn't work. So that was the first time that I used a technical solution, and I was like, okay, this can be a beginning for our research. Then I started researching in different terms and in different ways, not only technically how to do this lighting, but also what are the bodies that are on the stage. And I arrived into a Brazilian teacher called Dorje Leal. She has a very important work on understanding the performer as something that is changing the narrative of the play, and that we as lighting designers, our job is to bring the topography of that bodies and of that histories to the stage. Because this whole understanding of diversity, like the word diversity now is like, it's a way of flattening our differences and of flattening the individuals and like flattening the topography of our bodies on the stage and the performers' bodies on the stage. Then the idea is not to flatten anyone, it's not that everybody should look the same or that the light should be homogeneous, but the opposite way, that we bring this topography of the bodies and of the narratives of the performers to the stage somehow. So I started with an experiment that was basically a photo shooting with lighting of. I had a couple filters. I had one light source in one side, one light source in the other side, and one in the back. And I invited some people from Berlin, like Sandra, for example, that you see on that picture, is a black activist that has been active since 30 years in Berlin, and her history brings me information, and her history is bringing something that is changing the narrative. So from this, like my whole life as a lighting designer, I always wanted to have this, you know, independent visual narrative, and that like you can tell stories visually, and this research brought me to another understanding that the history is already there on the skin of the performer. And my role is to bring that history to a better representation and to a better visuality. That's my job. So I think that was, for me, it was a big twist of what is the role of lighting and how the lighting can interact with the body of the performer. And I think I'm going to come back one slide, actually, that before going to the contrast and then to the more technical aspects. And the most important parameter of my research is to understand that there is no universal body and that there is no universal solution. So if someone is on the stage, that body is changing the light. It's always a relation between the body and the light, the dancer and the light, and it doesn't matter if I am changing the light only and not seeing what is being reflected there. And treating any kind of technical solution or any kind of being as something universal and treating whiteness as the reference doesn't help us in anything. So as lighting designers, set design, anything that we are, and people, what I'm trying to break in the process, and what I'm trying to break with my suggestion of creative process is exactly to take out the idea of a universal solution and take out the idea of universal being and take out the idea of whiteness as the reference of anything. So basically, that's the core of the project. So I made an experiment. I made this photo shooting, and I was always wondering, why is this, I see in this Netflix series and this photography references that I brought, always the one color from one side, another color from another side. And I was questioning, why is that a solution when you have a darker skin? And what I noticed is that you bring a stronger contrast to the skin and a stronger contrast to the body. So the use of colors doesn't make the color of the skin, in architecture we call it color fidelity. I'm gonna get a glass of water because I'm talking a lot. So it's not exactly about showing the color of the skin in its best way, and also because we are doing theater, so it's not about color reproduction, but like how to bring that body and to take that body out of the background and out of how to bring contrast, how to shine, and how to bring the texture of the skin and the texture of the body and the texture of the story that is in that body also to the stage. So the two colors they make, should I follow my time frame, or now that we have more probably? So this using colors from which different sides and different colors brings a higher contrast to the skin, and that helps on the eyes to see that skin. So it's basically like an optical trick to make this a more easier visualization of the dark skin tones. So then I brought side lights, and I made a mixture between theater lighting, like dense, theoretical side lighting, and film. So you have like this 3-point film lighting setting and a mixture of like theater with that. So I changed the angles a bit, put not exactly on the side parallel, but more like 45 degrees. And I put like a backlight. Then there is the makeup issue as well, because when I started the research, I read a lot in these articles that the makeup is also something else, that the makeup for black skin is different, and the whole understanding of having this matte skin that you usually use for white skin doesn't work, because you want the skin to reflect more. So the whole doing this shooting, like this photo shooting, made me understand that the whole process of like thinking different skin tones or dark skin tones would have to change, from the costume to the makeup to the lighting and everything that is around, no? So I started testing with colors. I started with the like white light, the very known 201. I don't know if lighting designers are there. And testing, okay, let's see how it works, white light, all right, from both sides. Then I keep trying with different color tones, and then I brought the pale lavender that like in lighting forums, they are always saying that the lavender would be, there's also something funny. So we always have these Facebook big groups of lighting designers or any kind of forums, and then every time that I would look, like, okay, what are other designers talking about this? There would be this post, someone saying, I need to make lighting for several people with different skin tones on the stage. What is your advice? And every advice was different from the other one. Like there was no common sense. And so that's something that I was, okay, pale lavender, someone said it's good, so I'm gonna bring pale lavender to it. And then I started trying with usually different colors, that the colors are clearly different. So warm from one side, cold from the other side, or lavender from one side and warm from the other side. I was just trying as much colors as I could with a high transmittance. For lighting designers, they know what that means, but basically that have a lot of light, because the skin color is already dark, so I wanted to have a higher incidence of light in the skin. And then I started trying with the prohibited color that is like, don't use green. And I tried with green and pale lavender to have this contrast as well. And then at some point, I decided to also use stronger colors and more saturated colors just as a trial. And through the process, I understood that that also works, and that when you have a very dark skin tones, more saturated colors worked pretty well. For example, like the palette that I started kind of grew throughout the years, so I could try with different skin tones in general. Then this picture is not a good picture. Like the photographer of this shooting is called Tuka Paoli. She would hate that I'm presenting this, but we were testing. We were trying to do the portraits with two people, so we'd compare different skin tones and different light tones, but it wasn't working, the framing wasn't right, and we were struggling here in the camera, and Luana and Sandra were there in front of the camera, and they started talking about the story of their skin. So it's like, my father is from this place, my mother is from that place, and like the color of her skin was that and that and that. And when I saw that moment, I said, okay, that's actually what this is about. It's not the history that everybody carries, and that is what lighting should give voice to, and that's the narratives that I should support as a lighting designer. And this is a picture that I took. I made a workshop in Brazil in my own university. And it was amazing for me because I was back home, and I was bringing this research that was developed in Germany, and through the pandemic years and through now. And I remember having I have the light here. I was on the backstage, and there was one of the technicians was inside the light we were testing, and I had plenty of BIPOC like in the workshop, and they were all behind me looking at it, and I said, guys, now you have to go there and look at yourselves under the light, because that's what it's about. And in the moment that they looked at each other and they saw themselves under, it's just light with a filter in front of it. They were so happy, and they were looking at each other in another way. And then I said, okay, this works, because I am changing they are seeing them represented in a different way with a very simple light setting. And that is something that I understood that changed the processes of the video. I'm not going to show, but the second part was we made a video with 2 different performers that I could test also the movement of lighting and the intensities with different skin tones. And before I finish, I think the part that that research brought to the stage and to the backstage, and that the praxis of like the creative process, is that I am always bringing, I bring 1 light source, I bring 2 light sources, I bring like a palette of filters, and I test with the performers, like in the rehearsal room, so we can see when I start the process, when I start to draw the light plots, I know already what works for every performer. And I bring that we talk about that with the costume designer, with the scenographer, we talk about makeup, we talk about how the whole team is working in a more elaborated way, thinking about skin tone as much as costume, as much as scenography. And this is a parameter that should be in from the beginning. And it's not something that we are going to solve in the setup, putting the intensity higher. So in the whole creative process, the skin tone and the story of that performer that is represented in that skin tone should be also considered all the time, and should be also brought to the stage as something that we understand, and that we acknowledge that if if that is a problem, it's our flaw. And to be our job to make sure that everybody and all the bodies and all the colors are well represented on the stage. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Raquel. And so, it is also necessary to understand that the epistemologies of the South are not present only in the countries of the South, but in the South of each region. Reviewing the classical models that have been used as universal means returning, therefore, to Greece, to question such absolute truths. How can we currently decolonize these narratives as we are seeing now? So I invite Maria Konomi, Greek scenographer and costume designer, professor of modern and contemporary drama and scenography at the Department of Theatre Studies at the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. She's also co-curator for Greek participation in this edition. So please welcome Maria.
Research. Thank you. So I will be talking on the subject of decolonized Hellas, Greece. This topic will be discussed in the wider context I am investigating of scenography as cultural practice, incorporating cultural politics and critical thinking in an expanded interdisciplinary approach to theory and artistic practice. I'm particularly interested in ways of understanding performance making and expanding scenography from a local knowledge, cultural perspective, beyond Eurocentric models, and within an exchange with the discourses influenced by the decolonization discourses. Following Priyamvadas Gopal's notion of decolonization as a process of thinking about our intellectual, personal, and political formation in a historical frame, and in turn, I am asking, how is decolonization and anti-colonial thinking relevant to Greece? Since Greece hasn't been the typical Western colony, though it was for a long time an Ottoman colony, and with regard to Western colonialism, it has been called a colonial scheme, a crypto-colony, and lately a debt colony. This next to the legacy of classical Greece, spearheading European colonial cultural power dynamics, becoming a foundation of the European colonial hegemony and cultural supremacy discourse. I am affirming that the decolonizing thinking contexts are relevant for Greece on many levels, in terms of participating in a reparative project of global justice and solidarity, and helping to implement it also at a local level, and moreover, as a more self-reflexive project of investigating and reconstructing individual and collective identities of Greek people. Yeah, it has a bit of reverberation, or no? Okay. All right. So according to Gopal, decolonization is also reparative of the European itself, seeking to understand and to extend knowledge about how cultures and communities outside it have also shaped Europe. Let's change also some images. Central to this discussion is understanding the binary conception of Hellas, Greece. According to Labropoulos, Greek people were historically under immense external pressure to respond adequately to the inflated expectation of European and American romanticism, to be true Hellenes, as this was presented to the Greeks as their only way or chance to define an acceptable identity and historically justified their political claims of independence. Hellas, as the West's construction of an idealized image of ancient Greece, has been central to shaping European modernity, as well as to legitimizing the existence of a modern Greece. Classicism values, aesthetics, and evolutionary hierarchies have been used to justify Western superiority and rationalize European conquest and enslavement around the world. Hellas, though, also encompasses the diachronic use of Greece as a buffer zone and cultural frontier between Christianity and Islam, East and West, capitalism and communism, civilization and barbarism. This discourse has been central to the project Decolonize Hellas, in fact, an active sociocultural project, a joint initiative of scholars and activists, civil society actors, and other people, led by a collective of social anthropologists, social historians, in dialogue with several cultural theorists of modern Greece and the global decolonization movements. Moreover, it has functioned as a wider thread of sociocultural critique, meaning to expose the colonial genealogies fueling the Orientalism, Balkanism, xenophobia, racism, homophobia, and sexism that are being articulated in its name. In the context of performance making and scenography, the active reshaping of the imaginary idealized Hellas and contemporary Greece through resisting colonial genealogies and their interpretations entails also changing the dominant narratives by altering artistic strategies, upturning dominant modes of thinking, and exploring a new dramaturgies of the real, turning to the use of real spaces and human agents, and their human agents, and performing in public open space, demonumentalizing tragedy and classical reception, documenting and building upon experiences, practices, and genealogies silenced and overlooked in dominant discourses and interpretive frameworks. Looking at some examples of active reshaping of Hellas Greece, Yorgos Zamboulakis, with Experimental Theatre of Thrace, created two site-specific performances with socially engaged dramaturgies and participatory strategies. Tea Time Europe and its sequel, Eat Time Europe, were created as political landscape actions in landmarks of conflictual topography and intense symbolism. Both locations were very close to the Greek-Turkish land borders, one of the main entrances of the refugees to Europe, the delta of River Evros, and a field near the border of the latter. These works were centered on the current immigration and refugee crisis, criticizing the stance of the enlightened Europe and offering instead some deeply humanistic and collectively voiced critical perspectives. Creating an allegorical and poetic landscape with a circle of 15 people sitting in chairs immersed in water for a surreal tea time ritual, the myth of the open, welcoming, civilized, and enlightened Europe is challenged by the ironic use of the European Union official emblems and allusions to EU bureaucrats. In Eat Time Europe, the solidarity engagement to the immigrants and refugees is reframed in a more optimistic and celebratory way. Hospitality and the acceptance of the other are presented as the ultimate human values for a period in which Europe is redefined. Other examples come from the field of classical drama in Greece, the genre most associated with ethnocentric and West-centric ideological constructions. In particular, Aeschylus, the Persians, has been considered an opportunity par excellence to glorify the nation and celebrate the victory over the other. In recent productions, we do find more and more alternative voices, like The Persians by Theodoros Terzopoulos in a Greek-Turkish production that crossed historical divides with artists from both countries who mourned together the destruction of war. And more recently, the documentary performance theatre project, We Are the Persians, developed by Yolanda Markopoulou in collaboration with displaced people from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Their punch-like performance was born out of the Station Athens Group 5-year theatre workshops for migrant and refugees run by the NGO Amaka. The performance combined classical material, but nevertheless took as a starting point their personal autobiographical testimonies from the Amygdaleza refugee camp in the outskirts of Athens, identifying their status as refugees and/or asylum seekers. These modern messengers ask us, for example, how far is the distance from the war zones of Kabul to the violence and racism of everyday Greek life? Marios Hadjiprokopiou argues that by intertwining the classical texts with their own voices and languages, they reappropriate and reinvent the voices of lament in ancient drama. The performance succeeds in disrupting and potentially transforming dominant ways of receiving ancient drama on the modern Greek stage. Euripides' Trojan Women, I'm going to move a bit forward, yeah, brings into the spotlight the vulnerable category of women, non-Greek refugees, and can be also read from a contemporary viewpoint as a stark pacifist and an anti-colonial critique of war violence and power abuse. The play itself has had a very complex performance history in Greece, receiving a belated and ultra-canonical premiere production in 1965. In contrast, Trojan Women by the artist scenographer Yannis Tsarouchis testifies to an alternative staging for tragedy, presenting an important rupture with the canon of performing tragedy in Greece. Presented in 1977, it demonumentalizes performance of classical tragedy and addresses contemporary Greece, not idealized imaginary Hellas, in a foundational period of transition from dictatorship to parliamentary democracy, the period of metapolitefsi, after the fall of the 7-year military junta in reign between 1967 to 1975. Other important innovations of the performance include the early introduction of a proto-site-specific approach to Greek theater with a turn to real, non-institutional theatrical space, in this case a parking lot in Athens, in combination with visible contemporary political reference and the use of contemporary costumes and military uniforms of the junta esagides. Through such innovations, the performance managed to tap into the experiential collective memory of the audience, affecting primarily a self-reflexive approach in relation to the recent events of Greece's turbulent history, implementing a performative critique of the colonial regime. By affecting different aspects of critical classical reception, productions like the ones discussed activate a sharp cultural critique and an attempt to question the oppressive Western hegemonic canon in Greece, attempting ultimately to problematize the binary conception of Hellas Greece. The sociocultural critique of the colonized Hellas Greece informed also to an extent the foundational framework of some of the student performance projects that we brought this year here at PQ as part of the Greek student participation to explore exploring the theme Athens, counter-monument, an assembly of political bodies. So I'm going to show some images here. The rationale of the theme highlights the need to overcome the somehow still prevalent one-sided view of the historical center of Athens as a monumental ensemble with reference mainly to antiquity, which undermines the diversity of the lived experience in a contemporary multicultural city, providing many different sociopolitical stimuli and critical contexts. Instead, students opted to explore the city sites and social places as counter-monument and the political body as personal and collective somatic writing in public space. Emerging issues are the politics of identity, gender and sexuality, love and desire, autobiographical reflections, next to social concerns regarding gentrification, homelessness, and the immigrant refugee crisis, media manipulation, even co-opting with the current protest mobilizations of the art world in Greece. Some closing remarks. Following this brief discussion, I propose that by activating aspects of current anti-colonial theory and practice, and by reframing discussions in performance making and scenography, it exposes the persistent legacies and afterlives of colonialism, and we can interrogate and dismantle harmful mythologies and falsehoods, and hopefully contribute to a wider horizon of making another world of global justice possible on both artistic and socially minded realities. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Maria. And unfortunately, after Napo, Stuart couldn't also participate at this table at all. So now we are open for debates and questions from the audience to further expand this conversation. Please, feel free to take the microphone for questions, comments, and provocations. And thank you all for these great, inspiring, and very provocative presentations. Thank you. We always like shy in the beginning, but if you want to just expose, we are just opened so many discussions in this morning. Just to say that we have Shabari online also, if you want to make some conversations with her also, please.
So it's not so much a question, but more a reflection on our state of theater making, and it's inspired by your experiments with lighting, about when we want to say add more light, it doesn't help. But isn't part of the problem that we have the convention of masking our entire theater in black spaces, which of course puts all the white bodies into perfect contrast, but does absolutely nothing to help bring life to all the other colored bodies, which are not in black environments normally? And is there a way that when we're talking of rethinking the way we work, can we rethink our theater spaces in terms of what happens with that black void that we start with in the beginning? So it's an unanswerable question, I think, but I just wanted to share it with the room in case somebody else had something else to say.
No, I think you're completely right, because in this controlled environment of doing the photo shooting and the video shooting later on, I had white walls and I had a white background. So I think this is something that needs to be discussed, no? And I think that also the whole relation with scenography in relation to the body that is there, and this idea of contrast and so on. I think there are things that we can change that is within each process, and regarding costume and makeup and the scenography itself, what is behind that body, what is in front, how is that scenography reflecting lighting as well, is something that we can change. Like the black box is not exactly so easy to change, I guess. But it's a question that is always in the process that I'm involved, because it's just a black hole, you know. Whatever light you put, it just gets absorbed, and the body, if you have a dark costume and a dark skin tone, the person completely disappears. So it's good to think about changing things, and I've tried also with white floor. We work with dance, so the floor becomes a very big thing, and it helps, but then you lose contrast in the same side, depending of which light effect you have. But everything is about compromises in the end. You know? Like there's nothing that works for all the settings, I guess.
Also, I'd like to think, I'm thinking just in terms of space, because of course we understand how we just accepted the black box and why we just kept this, because it's so could be efficient for a lot of reasons, but we could consider also other kind of experiences and spaces and conditions, right?
Hello, yes. I guess to continue with the reflection offered, I will give another provocation, I guess, that comes into mind, and it's that the black void takes away reality. So then we get into this exceptional mode that I think we are discovering that it's not that great, because taking away reality means, that everything in the world changes. So maybe the question is that we humans are not that important anyway. Because as a lighting designer, we're always asked to see the performers. We have to see them. And when you're immersed in a space that has personality, just like this one, then maybe we're not that important in the sense of being the protagonists. So I'll just take further the provocation to think in a post-humanist way, and think that maybe, the way we insist on being the protagonists of the story, the bodies that matter the most, then we're just going to find that we're not that relevant. But that would be another provocation for the room.
Yes, I think it's a good question. As Shabari told us, I tried to have her here. Also, she could speak a little bit more about this perspective beyond the anthropocentric perception, right?
Thank you for that question. I can't see who it is who asked because I can only see the stage. But it's also funny to talk about a non-anthropocentric position and see like such a big projection of my head on the wall. There we are. I completely agree with you, and I think the person who asked or spoke about the post-humanist condition, and I think the work that I am engaged in currently speaks directly to that. And I wonder whether you had a sense of that in the clip of the film that you had a chance to watch.
Okay, you will share something or not? No.
Sorry, are you talking to me?
Okay, sorry.
Well, this was just a response to the film, and I definitely felt a sense of duration, and was started to call into question whether narrative is required in duration. So I just want to thank you for that, because I had to go back and forth as I was watching the film. I'm experiencing duration. Does that mean I'm also experiencing narrative? And can duration exist without the person, without the human body?
Yeah, I think we put the human body in there as an anchor, as a place to begin to watch. And as nothing much happens, you perhaps begin to look at other things as well. And, just the human is not actually doing very much. But we did work a lot with duration. And one of the things that we noticed was that it's very difficult to conceptually understand what 2.5 billion years would mean. But when you start to slow down, the experience of time itself expands. And that was something that we were playing with in this film.
Cool, thank you, Shabari. So we have few questions. We have more about 5 minutes, so maybe 2 or 3 questions, please.
So I have a question from a scenic design perspective, because oftentimes in scenic design we start before casting has even happened. So I'm kind of wondering, how can I, as a scenic designer, make a more inclusive set before we know the background or history of the actors who are going to be on stage?
Can I answer? I don't know. I think it's hard, and I think if you have to do it before the performers are there, it's hard to have a reference of what should it fit to, but maybe to make choices that can adapt, or to have a structure that can adapt, that can be more like that is flexible. I think the word would be flexibility, in a way that if you have to, and it's again the things that we cannot change, like it's a process that you enter and then you have to give ideas and inputs to scenography without knowing for which bodies or which performers are there. Maybe to have in account that the color is something that, not specifically about my project, the color changes a lot, so that you could have a palette, like kind of in the pocket, some options of colors that could work, but the different performers and bodies are not only about colors. You know, we have other people with disabilities on the stage, and that changes completely the scale of scenography. I was participating on a panel the other day that the costume designer also had a lot of experience with scenography, with performance with disabilities, and it's a whole other perspective on costume. But I understood that, again, the whole work was way more about making it more simple and simplifying the costume, for example, than to make it more complicated. It was, yeah, it's another perspective as well.
I have a question for Maria. Thank you very much for your presentation, and I would like to ask you if you could expand or speak about the importance of place, especially having heard what other speakers spoke about, the post-humanity and the limitations of presence, or we have been too anthropocentric. Many of the productions that you discussed, well, actually all of the productions that you discussed, were in a space that had character, but many of those instances come from a profoundly humanistic tradition of classical Greek tragedy, which is focused on the human. So I'm just interested in if you could expand on the importance of space in relation to the very vulnerable, sometimes non-human human. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much for your question. Because actually, I think that, as I was reflecting also some other questions that started about the sort of turn away from the anthropocentrism and the kind of ultra focus on the human narrative, and of course in these social contexts still we need to acknowledge some of these actors because they are overlooked, they're made invisible, and we sort of, it's a sort of responsibility to give voices to these alternative people. But a lot of the context is, I think, transferred also to the space, the whole environment. So actually, this somehow even precedes, I mean, the physicality and the social meanings that are attributed over time, though, you know, to the place. Maybe not so much in a more, let's say, geological or time-wise, like Shabaro was showing us, which was really interesting, but also as a sort of joint, let's say, accumulation from the natural environment and elements like the water, the land, or the urban context and stuff, which also have like this joint, I think, aspect of the space in a diachronic kind of perception of it, but also as a social place. I think more and more the weight of the meaning is also transferred to this, prioritizes the space, and then in many of the productions, and anyway, I am particularly interested in this site-specific connection to the space, both as pedagogy or as performance making or in the theorizing of the productions. And I think, so yeah, if we prioritizing space, then we seek, let's say, a more organic connection with environment and space to whatever part of the human narrative comes into play, because in the productions I showed, the human narrative does come into play, but also there is this kind of joint relationship with the let's say, the prioritizing of searching to find meaning and maybe narratives from the space, and not particularly imposing our own sort of prefabricated human narratives onto the productions. So I'm not sure if I kind of answered your question, but and obviously in the context of the classical plays, which are anyway adaptations, so they're not like the complete canonical, let's say, text. So they're reinventions using all the classical materials, sometimes in very distorted ways and masked and very hybrid ways. But in these instances, I think it particularly helps to move away from the logocentrism and go into another directions like the space, the environment, and discover other layers of meaning from there.
Yeah. So thank you. Unfortunately, we should end this first panel. So thank you, Raquel. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Shabari, for this. Thank you all for having us in this morning. And thank you, Barbara, and all the PQ team. So see you in the next panel. Thank you. And we keep the conversation outside, please.
Thank you very much for joining us.